I see that we are live. Why don't you take it away, Mike?
Hey everyone, welcome to Good E-Reader Live, your most favorite and most comprehensive e-reader show on the planet today. And we're going to be talking about e-readers and what is next
Yes, we are
for
going to
2021.
cover what is next on e-readers and e-ink devices in general, and we're also going to be doing some touching on Android devices versus non-Android devices and see kind of who is leading the pack, who's paving the way, who is following suit, who's reacting to everything, etc. So let us start it off with Android versus, say, Linux and non-Android based e-readers. Recently, and I've written everything down, so I'm going to be referencing this, there are more Android driven devices and devices that run apps and all that fun stuff that is revolving around the Android culture than non Android e readers. It used to start off that there were just non-Android e-readers. They had their proprietary UI. They're running Linux. They're running whoever developed for them. But now there are over 10 manufacturers that use Android: Onyx, Boyu, MobiScribe, Sony, Fujitsu, etc., Tolino. And actually, there are companies like Supernote that use both. For their first gen, they were using Linux-based operating systems, and now for their latest X line, A6X, A5X, they're using a Android version that allows them to take the driver's seat in what they deliver via Android. For example, they just released the Kindle application for the Supernote line of devices. And up until this point, and even now, you can't sideload in apps. So it's not the Android experience like, say, Onyx and Boyu is. And in fact, Onyx and Boyu are the only e reader manufacturers where you can sideload in APKs natively. Every other manufacturer, you really can't do that without rooting, without hacking, without skinning it, without putting in launchers. You can't do that naturally on e-readers as much as people think they can. But yeah, there is a lot of Android devices, and there's fewer Linux nowadays. And why such the divide, Mike? Why don't you kick everything off?
Well, if we go and look back to e-readers when they first started gaining popularity, like the Amazon Kindle, and
Yeah,
followed by Kobo, and then the Barnes and Noble Nook, and then a myriad of other companies. Um, Kobo and Amazon were using Linux from like day one because it's like they didn't need to license it. They didn't need to publish like their firmware, like their programming type of stuff. Whereas with Android, it's pretty well like they people are encouraged to like share their source like on GitHub and stuff like that, which sort of gives away trade secrets, which is why Boyu and Onyx and like all the Android e-readers, they don't publish like their source code like they really should. So Linux. So early days, Amazon and Kobo were using Linux. The benefits of that is that you could really control the experience from making the hardware to making the software. It's sort of like what Apple does, with iOS. They design the operating system, and then they design like the actual hardware, and everything synergizes really really well. So it's the same with like Linux, that's really optimized for e-readers. Battery life for one, stability number two, being able to really kind of put lower tier batteries in Linux devices and actually get longer battery life, because
that's true.
you're not running like with Android, it's like background processors
That's
really
the biggest
hamper,
thing.
yeah,
Yeah,
really
when
hamper
you
performance.
you don't actually notice on Android devices, but when you open something on a Kindle, like you open up your browser, then you get out of it and you go back to your manga or you go back to your PDF or your book, that browser has basically stopped. On Android devices, especially Google Play services, enabled devices, there's so much framework and there's so many background processes that are constantly running, pinging for location, pinging for updates, trying to geolocate where you are, all these things that are just draining your battery and going against the inherent nature of e-readers, which is long battery life. That's why people use, Max Lumis and stuff, and no discredit to Onyx because they are basically tablets, but they run out in a week. versus a Kindle that runs out in like 2 months. So it's like people never really understood why, but that's the reason why. Is because every time you open anything on Android, you're not just opening one thing. It opens something and then it spider webs into all these other services and things that it needs to run to make it run smoothly and properly.
Yeah, if you look at Linux e-readers, what the vast majority are using like 1200 milliamp batteries. They seldom ever go over 2000 milliamp batteries, because with Linux you really don't have to. Everything sort of force closes whenever you open and do things. And part of the reason is that there's not a lot of customized apps like on Linux. You have your ebook reading app, which is sort of heavily customized, and the web browser, some basic games, and doodle apps and things like that. Amazon has the Goodreads integration. So a lot of those things are like optimized for e-ink and done to preserve battery life, fast refreshes, never prone to crashing. Like I've never really had like a Kobo or an Amazon ever sort of say that I've ever had to
Ah,
reboot it.
except on the early I want to say Paperwhite 1, remember when we tried to run some PDFs, it wasn't because it was crashing because of any virus or anything. It was lack of RAM, but we got several force closes on running PDFs that were side loaded, maybe weren't properly side loaded. They ran certain Unicodes and stuff like that that the Kindle couldn't support. There was a lot of force closes and crashes on early Kindles when it came to PDFs, but
Yeah, they ended
that
up
was the extent
fixing
of
it
it.
with the
And to be
firmware
fair, there
update
wasn't.
though.
They did, they did. That's right. And then we noticed that in all the videos when we started showing our benchmark PDF tests and comparisons, that the Kindle was like, heads over heels what it used to be, because early on the Kindle was like could not handle PDFs to save its life. So it was very interesting to see that development.
Yeah, and there's very few digital note-taking devices that are running Linux. Supernote was running Linux for their A5 and A6, and they're the outliners. Like the Sony Digital Paper was running Android. Almost all the other e-notes on the market are running Android as their core OS, even though that you might not know it, like the Fujitsu Quaderno, the Quark Logic Paper, the entire Onyx, the
Yeah,
entire Lightbook product line. They're all running Android.
Barnes and Noble,
Yep, Barnes and Noble, Nook.
Tolino. Yeah.
Yep, Tolino is like they're sort of going back to e-readers just really quick. Yeah, I mean Barnes and Noble from day one was using Android on their Nook and then using Android on their tablets. They were sort of one of the few to use Android at the very beginning. So that's you would never know it though, and it's a pretty stable experience just because it's like severely like locked down. So yeah, but with Android devices, instead of like 1200 milliamp batteries, you need like 3000, 4000, 5000 milliamp batteries on the larger screen e-readers are common these days. And the reason is because Android has a lot of background processes that drain the battery. So one way to kind of get around not having to recharge it every 2 or 3 days is just like to have like a gigantic battery in it, but that just creates problems. Like it's heavier, it weighs more.
It's more expensive.
Yeah, exactly. So with Android, there's a lot of pros and cons. I mean, obviously half the Android e-readers, like just e-readers, are just like locked down to hell. So it's like it is running Android, but there's like no Android benefits, like no tangible benefits to the end users. It's like you can't install
Yeah.
widgets, you can't install launchers, you can't install apps. It's basically an Android operating system, but it's so heavily skinned that you can't get access to any of the core functionality of Android. So
Yeah.
that's sort of like for e-readers, that's it. Like a Tolino running Android, but it's like
Means nothing.
it's a basic e-reader. It's like when you use it, you don't really care about the operating system because like it just provides like a lot of options and stuff. Whereas like with like e-notes that are sort where with Android is the selling point of buying them, that's where you could start sideloading apps, like
Right.
whether it's an e-ink smartphone or if it's like a digital note-taking device, where they mention Android as the key selling feature, and then you can install apps. You can get Google Play access with certain brands and things
Like
like
Onyx, they're
that.
up to Android 10 right now, and they write that on the box. They're like, enabled Android 10. It's like one of the four little selling feature squares, promotional things on the box, and that's why you want to buy that, and that's why they released the Android, the Note 2 and the Note 3 in such quick succession, is because it was easier to release a device with 10 than get older hardware and try to upgrade to 10 on that in the here and now. So now we're up to Android 10, which is like, yeah, crazy. And like Mike said, if you're wanting a device that is promoting Android and promoting Google Play, it's like, great, okay, I'll do that. But all these devices like Barnes and Noble and Tolino and stuff that are running it, again, going back to the start of the episode, unless you skin it or you root it or you do some sort of technical thing, then you won't care that it's running Android. Having it saying it's running Android is just something on paper. It means nothing to you.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, Barnes and Noble, especially with the earlier devices, had a really vibrant hacking community on XDA developers, where you could just like download like a patched firmware update and give you Google Play like on the Barnes and Noble e-readers without losing access to the Barnes and Noble store and stuff like that. So it was like sort of like Android opening it up to app installs was sort of like a feature. And if you remember, like when the Barnes and Noble Simple Touch came out, there was a lot of like gifs and pictures and stuff, people playing Angry Birds like on their like Barnes and Noble e-reader. And I mean, obviously refresh was like a big like deal back then, just it doesn't just work. And with modern Barnes and Noble e-readers like the Nook Glow Light 3 and the Barnes and Noble the Plus, the 7.8 that they released like last year,
Yeah.
it's like not that many people have them now, so there isn't really
I
like too
wonder
much of a
why.
there's just, well, I mean, so basically what I'm getting at is that Barnes and Noble used to have a vibrant hacking community for the
Yeah,
earlier e-readers, but
tons.
that's sort of disappeared now. And people are sort of embracing more of like the open Android standard, where you can just sideload apps from like day one, instead of
Right.
like rooting a device that just fewer and fewer people have.
And to elaborate a little bit on what Mike's saying, if you guys are confused about heavily skinned devices, we have seen a lot of devices like the iReader and the iFlyTech and the Xiaomi and all these e-reader companies that have Android on them. And some of them that you'll know because they're running the latest color technology, like the iReader C6 and whatnot. You can't just go ahead, plug it into your computer, drag and drop, your Gmail APK over to it, and will install. You can't do that. Most of these devices do not allow you to even visit other URLs. You can't go to another website. You have to stay in the Chinese WeChat or Baidu or Migu ecosystem, meaning you can only download like Youku if that particular device allows you to. It basically is completely controlled. So it's running Android to their core when they develop the unit, but it's not running Android for you to plug it in and drag and drop APK files and games and Facebook and Instagram. You can't do that. The open Android devices like Boyu and Onyx are really the only guys you could simply plug your device into your computer and install things. That's as flexible as you're gonna find. All these other guys like Sony and Fujitsu, they're all skinned, which means they're Android, but they got skin on top, and you can't get through it. So it's completely blocked out experience. Basically, what it is.
And yeah, I mean, if anybody wonders why we talk about the Onyx brand and the Lightbook brand so much, is that because they embrace sort of the open Android standard,
That's
where
right.
it's like you can install Google Play right on the device from their own app stores and get going. Whereas like almost all the other Android e-readers, they're just like so locked down
Yeah,
that you can't
nothing.
even sideload apps. So they might as well just be a basic like e-reader. So
That's right.
yeah, there's a lot of distinction between the operating system, but it also influences the brand too. So, if we look at Linux based e-readers, you have to wait for that company to include new functionality.
Yeah,
So, for instance, no Kobo e-reader can access cloud storage right on the device except for the
no.
Kobo Forma, which got official Dropbox integration earlier this year, I think it was around like April, that only the Forma got it. So it's you if you want to get new features and new sort of things, you have to wait for that company to like develop it, to devote engineers to it, to find out if this is like a feature that people would
Yeah.
want. When they updated all their e-readers for overdrive integration, that was like the
Oh,
biggest thing
that
that
was right.
they had ever done, where like you can finally just enter your digital library card in the settings menu, browse your local branch's like collection of like ebooks, click on a book, and then just click borrow right on the e-reader. You don't have to go to any other sites, do anything else. It's like everything is just done on the e-reader. And like for and it's like just everything just happens really quick. It's like
Yeah.
super responsive. There's no animated carousels. It's like they really did a really good job with overdrive integration on the Kobo. And that's sort of like a testament to one of the great things about Linux and a bigger company that actually has the manpower to develop new things and issue them out, they did Dropbox for the Kobo format because it's like their flagship e-reader. If people really care about accessing like their Dropbox collection, you'll spend like $300 to buy their biggest e-reader if you want cloud storage. And for people who already had the Kobo format, it just came courtesy of like a firmware update. With Amazon, they tend to like not really introduce new software features really regularly at all. If anything, they just like move things around, from the settings menu to like the font menu, or like, they just tend to like do like a lot of like A/B testing, this to see like if people are accessing certain functionality in this menu system, or if they move it around and like bring it over here if more people are doing it over here. So Amazon's the type of company that does a lot of A/B testing, but they don't introduce like a whole lot of new features on a regular basis. It's like stability and quality of like life improvements. Whereas like Kobo tends to do more cool new features every now and again. Tolino as well, mainly because Kobo is doing their software. They just did like a family sharing type of thing, a new update. I think it was like the 5.10 update. So they just did something. But yeah, a lot of companies that do Linux, especially smaller companies, when you buy it at day one, that's more or less the experience that you're going to get. I look at like Bokeen, based in Paris, traditionally like a French company, although they sell their e-readers all over the world. So if you speak French, like in Quebec, Canada, or if that's like your secondary language or your primary language, they're a good e-reading company to purchase. They run Linux and stuff like that, but they don't really issue too many firmware updates because like they're a pretty small company. So you're not going to get those quality of life and new features and enhancements at all. So really, with Linux e-readers, it's like the bigger the companies are, the more regular firmware updates that they'll do, which will solve bugs, introduce new enhancements, new fonts, new dictionaries, just kind of cool new features that it's like, it's really just Kobo and Amazon at this point that are really doing it with any
And
regularity.
Pocketbook is running Linux as well.
Yes. And so a lot of people maybe watching our stream may not be too familiar with Pocketbook, but they've been around for about 12 years. They're basically like located, I think, like in Germany. And if
And
you had,
Ukraine,
yes,
Kiev,
and
Kyiv, Ukraine, or whatever. Yeah.
yeah, and they do all their manufacturing in China, along with like what Kobo and Amazon and stuff does. So that's not really a big deal. So I mean, all e-reader manufacturing really happens in China or Taiwan.
Pretty much
So
80%, 90% of it. Yeah, that's right.
yeah, so
And therein lies the difference right there, what Mike said. You have to wait for these companies to push things. If I wanted Overdrive on my Kobo, there's going to be announcements and updates that says, oh, Overdrive's coming soon. I got to go do, and I got to wait for it. If I had an Android device and download the Overdrive APK, sideload it in, and Bob's your uncle. I'm using Overdrive way before you are. But there's the problem is that it's Overdrive meant for a Galaxy or for a trending flagship
totally.
smartphone. So is it going to work really well? It might, Is it going to drain your battery quicker? Probably, but you can use it. Having Android that is open gives you the option to get all these things. I don't have to wait for Overdrive. I don't have to wait for Dropbox. Download a Dropbox APK. Done. I have Dropbox. But it's not going to be perfectly conformed to your e-ink device. For example, we have a Goody Reader app store, and for years we were operating it just blanket across everything, and then we started seeing Android devices pop up a lot more in with e-ink. And then when we were at a board meeting, Mike was like, well, why don't we just scale it down and get the things that actually work for e-ink and make a separate store? So that's why you might have noticed we have two. We have an e-ink app store. Those we found are going to work on e-ink devices. Now, there's not 50,000 plus apps like there is on our major app store, but it's catered to e-ink, because when you're developing for e-ink, you can't think tablet because it's just not the same. You got to think e-ink. Screen size has to work, has to have, like Mike said, you have to have limited page animations and bleeps and bloops and star wipes and stuff like that. It has to be simple for it to work on an e-ink device.
Yeah, what we noticed early on, especially with the Android devices that you could sideload apps on, is that a lot of apps, obviously they're designed for tablets and smartphones.
Yep.
So bells and whistles, animated page turns, you access like the settings menu, and it's like whoo, a cool like little animation and stuff like that. And when it comes to e-ink, it doesn't handle animations that well,
Not well.
because it's
No.
just the way that e-ink is designed with like the black and white particles. It's like refreshing is like a huge problem with e-ink. So if you have animated page turns with iBooks on like your like iPhone, or like your like iPad, or iPod Touch, or even like your MacBook and stuff, it looks
Yeah.
awesome. All the little animated page turns, the peeking function and stuff when you turn pages.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
it looks great. But you run that on like, I mean, obviously they don't make Android versions of it, but if they, a lot of the Android equivalent apps with peeking and like all that type of stuff, it's
Yeah.
just like
And then it looks all grainy, and it's slow, and everyone's like, oh, why isn't it as fast as my Sony phone? And it's like, then you got to get into the conversation that it's e-ink, and then people just say, well, I'll just buy a tablet. And then you're like, you're not listening. And then it just explodes. So that's why, yeah, going with Linux has major benefits, because the things that come out via the updates from the big companies are proven to work on that respective device.
yeah, I mean, Kobo's overdrive integration on their like Linux based e-readers, phenomenal. There's
Mhm.
like no animated page turns, like everything is just like excellent. Even just browsing, there's no animated carousels. There's nothing to really to bog you down. Whereas if you sideload in like an app that's designed for smartphones and tablets, you're not going to get the great experience sideloading that APK on an Android device. So that's kind of like the trade-off between Android and Linux. I'm more of a Linux fan just because I like rock solid stability. I like just buying an ebook from a retailer and just instantly reading it on my device. Sometimes there's quality of life features that are great, but when it comes to e-notes, really there's not a lot of Linux devices on the market for digital note-taking devices.
I like
Like they're
force
all
closing
Android.
myself. I like side loading something in, and then the Android device saying unable to parse the package. And then I'm like, maybe I'll try an older version. And then I put it in and it force closes. No, but you run into that a lot, especially with e-ink. And e-ink is typically a lower Android version. For example, devices that were made years ago are just getting older Android versions now. For example, Boyu is a good example of this, because they've really been pushing their Android update. On the Mars, which is 2 years old, they just released Android 8.1. Well, 8.1 is not current. It's high, it's just not current. A lot of other devices, they max out at 5.5, maybe 4, 4.4. So it's like, e-ink devices, there's a handful that run Android, and there's less you can count on one hand that actually run anything current. So there's so many variables when it's Android. Is my version right? Is my screen size right? Can I download this APK? Is it going to work? Linux just works. If Amazon puts out X and says X will work, you click on X and it works. That's it. It works.
Yeah, if you we look at firmware updates, because that's one of the most important thing when you're buying an e-reader is how often is a company releasing firmware updates to give you new features, fix bugs, introduce new things, right? um when Kobo and Amazon, two of the biggest companies that people know of who are watching our live stream here, um when they release updates, Kobo releases updates for every single e-reader that they've ever made, minus the Kobo Mini. So even if you bought an e-reader like in 2011, it's still going to get the same update as like the Kobo Forma gets. Although sometimes like the modern e-readers introduce like a fewer new features or solve particular bugs, but all in all, like if they like do new dictionaries or new fonts or like this and that, it goes to every e-reader that they've ever made. Amazon generally goes about 4 or 5 generations back just to encourage people to sort of like upgrade from 5 or 6 year old devices. Whereas a lot of the Android driven e-readers, firmware updates are few and far between. And what really and generally when they release updates, they don't release like Android build numbers. So if you have an Android e-reader that you bought, if you have the first generation Onyx Book Nova, or if you have the the Boyu Book Mars, or you have some sort of like Android e-reader that was like made 4 or 5 years ago, it's running like Android 6. And despite the fact that you may be able to sideload apps and download Google Play, a lot of apps just aren't compatible anymore with Android 6. Or, generally it's like 7 and up or 6.5 and up, or it's generally like 7 and up now, just because of like the way that Android SDKs work. New, when you release like a game or an app, you sort of do it with like a version of Android that the vast majority of people are using. Like hardly anyone has like a cupcake device now, or something with like 3.1 or 4.1. But there's
No.
still e-readers that were made like 6 or 7 years ago that people are using that still have like Android 3.1 or Android 4. Ice
Yeah.
cream sandwich. There's like, if you look at you know regrettably, there's no really comprehensive data set of e-readers currently in use that are running specific versions of like Android. When you look at sort of the what Google publishes when they say this is what people are using, you look at like earlier version of Androids and they just keep falling off, because like if you have anything like lower than like 6 right now, virtually every single app minimum requirements is far above what you have. And that's why
Right.
you get parsing errors like when you try to install apps, because the app, basically Google doesn't tell you why an app's not loading, but if it's a parsing error, it's generally due to your version of Android being too low to support a particular app.
That's
But
right.
Google being Google, they don't really like let an end user kind of know what that really even means.
It's a blanket error so that they don't have to explain to you. They just say parsing error. It could be screen size incompatibility. Sometimes it actually searches your device's hardware and makes sure you have things like gyroscope, accelerometer, so that if you're playing a game and it says shake the screen for maximum damage, it needs to have that hardware. You could be playing it on a smartwatch, you're like, oh, I don't have all this hardware, I don't have like the things it requires to make this game run as it would on my flagship smartphone, because flagship smartphones are pretty much fully loaded, whereas e-readers sometimes don't even have speakers, sometimes don't even have onboard audio. So when Google and the respective app searches and pings to see, okay, does it have this, check this, check, oh, it doesn't have this, parsing error, just blanket failure.
Yeah, it's because like generally Google's like minimum requirements for place certification is that it needs a gyroscope, a GPS, an
Yeah,
accelerometer. It needs all the things that like virtually every modern smartphone or tablet has right out of the box. Whereas e-readers, they tend not to have it. So when you have e-readers that you can sideload apps or have Google Play, it's like not really official versions of it. They just like get it to work on their devices through
yeah.
their own business practices. But all
That's
the end
right.
user really cares about is like, can I download apps? It's a bit of a bitch, but I can do it. If it has Google Play, great, because then it's like having an e-reader with a built-in bookstore. You could just buy books right on the device without having to sideload them. Who really wants to sort of do all the manual work in 2020 or 2021? Like, e-readers these days, at least the successful ones, have built-in bookstores where you can buy books, whether and everything else is like superfluous when it comes to just an ebook reader. E-notes a little bit more demanding because, like, you want but something that will last, something that like has a good stylus, a good screen, because like e-notes are just expensive. You're spending like generally over 300 all the way to about like $1,000, depending on what type of screen that you want, what type of functionality and feature set do you want. There's a lot of variables, and that's why like every year we do like top 10 e-notes of the year on our YouTube channel for a video, just to be able to like basically tell you what they're all about, what they bring to the table, what you should be looking for if you're looking to get into this for the first time, and what is our ranking of like the top 10 or top 5, because we review every single one that comes out. So we know a little bit more about it. So we sort of, when we talk about it like on our show, we kind of assume that people know what e-notes are, that people know what e-readers are, and the distinction between the two. Even though
Right.
e-note, you can use it as an e-reader. They both have e-ink screens. It's just with e-notes, it has Wacom active digitizer layers, Wacom integration and stuff. So you can use it to draw with. Whereas with e-readers, they tend to be more affordable, less feature rich, but at the same time, a lot of people just want to buy Paperwhite 4, read ebooks, pre-order like their favorite ebooks, and they instantly get delivered. With Kobo, there's a lot of reasons to choose Amazon or Kobo, and in between. And we've talked about that at length on other shows, so I'm not going to get rehashed into it. But um to finish off this Android Linux argument, Peter, what is your preference?
Android's better. I'm out. No, I would say I like Android because that's all my points. If I want something, I can kind of deal with the fact that it doesn't work perfectly, but I have it. If I need email on my device and I need, Google Drive, and I need a game or two, something simple like blocks or whatever, I have that ability to do it on an Android device. On Linux, you don't. You can only just hope to gosh and wait for whatever the big company decides to give you. Supernote just released Kindle for the Supernote line, but that's it. Didn't release anything that allows you to download from millions of other apps, but it's more stable, it lasts longer, it's more clean, it's just less prone to crashing. There's no clear winner because they're just apples and oranges. They're so vastly different. They look very similar. You're using a Tolino, you're using a Barnes and Noble, you're using an Android. They all look similar. They're all e-ink devices. But when you dive in past that, just past the first layer, and you finally realize, oh, I can install APKs, oh, I can't, oh, I have to wait for updates from the big guy and stuff like that. There's so many variables. There's so many variables. That's why it's such a topic of discussion, because on its surface they're just e-readers. So I read a book, hey, this is great, that's it. You want to do deep dive, you want to do anything else, there may or may not be some hurdles.
Yeah, for me, I'm more of a Linux fan. Um, Not just because of like the open source type of stuff, and to be fair, Amazon does, if you Google Kindle open source, there's actually like a cool repository of like a lot of the Kindle source code that like they publish. They don't do all of the secret sauce, but they do enough that like if you're looking to like make your own
Secret
e-reader or
sauce.
something, you have like some sort of frame of reference on like what Amazon's doing. So if you're like an engineer looking to get involved in like making an e-reader OS or like a fork of Linux to make some sort of graphical user interface and things like that, it's a good place to get started. But yeah, for me, I like stability, I like battery life. Okay, so when it comes down to this, I have an e-reader that I just use to read books, and that's it. I don't need anything else. I don't need to like install apps. I mean, I have an iPhone for apps. I have like
There you
my
go.
iPad for apps. I could watch videos. I could like do all like my workflow and stuff. But I could read the news and things like that. All like the Feedly and like all my RRS like feeds and stuff like that. Hey, that's cool. When it comes to reading, I just like something that I could buy books on, that I could change the fonts. I could sideload in my own fonts if I want. I just, I have a little bit of advanced customization that I could do just because I'm a savvy e-reader guy. I'm the king of e-readers after all. But, I just like to buy books and read books, and that's it. I like my e-readers to be a singular purpose reading experience. I don't know. What does Chad think about any of this?
So we are having just a lot of people asking about, is the Forma a good e-reader? Can I read it at night? Is it better to wait? And did I win the Pocketbook contest that was last week? So there wasn't actually too much chat. I think it was just you and me talking, Mike. And then all these other guys are like, does anyone in chat know about this app and stuff? I don't think anyone's really listening to us.
Well, that's what the
You
VOD is for.
That's what the VOD is for. You guys are great. That's awesome. I am going to post, because of the massive amount of questions about it, I'm going to post the link to the Pocketbook contest that we just wrapped a couple days ago. The winner is announced in the description, everybody, and the winner has been announced via our automated name grabber software. So basically, if you guys are wondering about the contest, I'll just do a little bit of a tangent. When you enter and you say I've done all those three things, what we basically do is we just grab the username of the YouTube user and we put it in the system. If you're VIP member, we copy it and we paste it 10 times. And then when that all gets jumbled and we click basically execute and we get the name that pops up, that's just the name that pops up based on all the names we put in the system. We just copy that name. We say, for example, Eric Yang won this recent one. We copied his name, said, Eric Yang, you're the winner. And we posted it in the description of the video. So when you enter our contest, it's completely randomized. We don't have any hand in it whatsoever. We don't even know who you guys are. And we ship you your thing. And we'll always put an update of your shipped package on Facebook with your name all blurred out and everything. So no one knows where you live. So that's kind of the process of everything. So, yes, the second section and topic of today is basically what's next. Michael and I were talking about, and last week we were talking about Amazon, what's next. And we were like, yeah, what is next? They have the Paperwhite 1, 2, 3, 4. They have the Oasis 1, 2, 3. They have LTE already. They have, bigger storage already. They don't do SD cards. They haven't
Multiple
had audio
colors,
sync.
like they
Yep.
introduced like new colors this year, where like
Yep.
if you have the Paperwhite, you have like 4 different color options now, like twilight blue, a lot of different options. Even like the basic Kindle now is like black or white. With the Oasis you can get like champagne gold,
Yeah.
or you can just get like the standard black. I mean, Amazon's done a really good job with like customization features. Like you don't have to buy a case anymore to kind of really stand out with an e-reader, with all these different like color options that are available. And they only really did
Yeah.
that this year. And who would have thunk
And
like predicted that?
and a lot of the time why people don't want cases is because the R&D to some devices and the design is so nice. The Oasis 2 and 3 look very, very beautiful. They're expensive. So sometimes people don't want to get a really nice aluminum build with a gold champagne color and then put a $4 Alibaba case on it. So it's like they want to show their device off, basically. So that's why the color options are on the up and up. And Amazon hasn't even had audio for almost 10 years. The last time they had audio was the Kindle Touch back in 2011.
At least with onboard audio, like
Speakers. Yeah,
speakers.
sorry,
Yeah.
I take that back. Speakers. So basically, I'll let Mike start this off. We'll start with Amazon and move on. But what is next for 2021? We know the virus held things up. Mike has been breaking a lot of stories about how Supernote got held up, how Onyx got held up by the virus. What's next for 2021?
Okay, so this year in 2020, we didn't really see, like we saw like a lot of the rise of color. And that was
Oh
like
yeah.
the big thing of this year was just like like 6 different color e-readers, a bunch of color phones. That was the big trend of this year. Um, and so towards the end of the year, there wasn't really a lot of major releases outside of Onyx. So Amazon, this is like the first year that Amazon didn't release anything.
Right?
Barnes and Noble didn't release anything. Kobo did the
Boyu
entry
release
level
anything?
yeah, Boyu. Kobo just did one single device, and it was a new SKU called the Kobo Nia.
Let's just tangent on that for 1 second. We Mike has deep dived. I don't know. He's been deep diving into the manufacturing of Foxconn and Netronics and all these places that build e-readers. The Nia is the first and only device by Kobo that was not built in the same place. And now we didn't know if this had something to do with the virus holding things up, and whether they just wanted to ramp up production and find a random place to just build their thing super quick and release it, because it was very out of character of Kobo. Kobo usually just innovated the next step of everything. They did this first, they did that first. This Nia felt like 3 steps back. It was slow, underperforming, made in China, and just felt like it was so like economy level, that it was just very out of character of their current line of stuff.
Yeah, it sucks. Like even like reviewing it,
Did you
it
hear
was
that spiel the way I cushioned the blow?
yeah,
And you're
it
like,
was
and Mike's
garbage.
like, condensed form. It was
Yeah,
pretty bad.
if you're gonna
Yeah.
buy a Kobo entry level e-reader, get the Clara HD. It's like at least a 300 ppi
Or
display.
the entry level. I was gonna say format. You're right. Yeah, never mind. Entry level Claire is good.
Okay, so the reason why I sort of like gave you a little bit of like what happened in 2020, because that gives us an indication on like where the industry is going for 2021. First of all, second generation E and Clio is going to be coming out. So it's designed for smartphones all the way to like 10.3-inch devices and everything else in between. So what does that mean? That means like we're going to see color e-readers that aren't just 6 inches in size, but range. So for 7.8, 10.3, 6.8, anywhere. So that opens up like a lot of flexibility for new companies to be able to try out this tech. And what has happened is e-ink has expanded the production of Kaleido 2 to Boston. So they're actually going to be
Baston.
so they're going to be
Baston.
manufacturing color for the first time in the US. And why that's a big news is because most of the big brands like Kobo based in Toronto, Amazon based in Seattle, Barnes and Noble based in New York, those are like the big companies that most people are familiar with when they think of e-readers, because they're sold in North America through various retailers. Easy to buy, try before you buy, and so on. So that having them in Boston gives like e-ink the opportunity to be able to invite executives out to Boston, or for them to fly out from Boston to New York, visit with Barnes and Noble, fly out to Toronto, visit with Kobo, bring this tech with them, and show them the benefits of that. So prospectively, we could see color devices, at least from Kobo in 2021. Kobo is the one e-reader company that's big enough, and they've never been risk adverse. They always try new things and see what pops and what doesn't. And so now that second generation Kaleido fixes a lot of the first generation's problems, better grayscale uniformity, designed to be able to work with the front light, designed to, it's just designed to be a drastic improvement on the first gen. And that means it's like ready for prime time. Will Amazon release a color Kindle in 2021? No, but 2022, likely. But that's only if like a major company like say Barnes and Noble or Kobo does it and proves there's like a big enough market for it,
Yeah.
for the Amazon to kind of to do the
Amazon
same.
lets a couple of these guys go first, and then they follow suit. Amazon, don't get us wrong, fantastic company, fantastic product, and arguably when you think e-reader, you think Amazon, you think Kindle, you think hot tub, you think jacuzzi. You know what I mean? It's like that. But
When you think of
Amazon,
facial tissue, it's Kleenex.
Kleenex or band-aids for bandages.
Yeah.
But Amazon, if you look back, they didn't do warm lighting first. They didn't do this first. They didn't do large screens first. They didn't do a lot of things first. They just reacted to things that were happening around them, and then they just did it better. They sold more, they built a better product, but they didn't really do it first. You know, Barnes and Noble did glow lighting first. You know, I think it was Kobo that did warm lighting first, smart light or whatever it's called. Amazon was not first to do almost any of these, and yet they're hugely successful to the hundreds of billions of dollars. Of course, not all that is attributed to the e-reader branch. That's the entire business as a whole. But you know what I mean is that, yeah, Amazon's going to have to see someone else do it first before they jump on and say, yep, color, let's go. And then all these amazing color oases come out. That would be pretty awesome.
Or Oasis.
Oasis. No, that is correct, actually. Yeah, Oasis. Wait, someone in
Uh
the chat, help us out with that. I actually don't know.
yeah, what is like, what's the plural of Oasis? It's
Although
like
I'll be fair, that
Apple,
Jay
like,
just said, I don't think anyone's actually listening to you because they're involved in the chat. So we could be talking about picking apples right now, Mike, and I don't think anyone's gonna listen till the after video there.
yeah, so
I'm just
suffice
playing
to
with you guys.
say, let's like look at companies individually and predict
Yeah.
what they're going to do. So Amazon, likely they're going to just do the Paperwhite next year. I think it's like the 5, maybe. I don't
But
even
what
know.
is it gonna be? It will be the
So
5, you're right, but what's it gonna be?
obviously incremental updates. I think that they'll probably just introduce warm light that they had from the Oasis
Mm-hmm.
onto the Paperwhite. It's like generally the only thing that they have left to do. They're pretty well feature capable. They can't really just release like a new device with like a USB-C port and think that that's enough of an upgrade for people to buy. They need to like fundamentally make a key selling feature for people to buy it. I think like yeah, so warm lighting would be like a good selling point, continuing for it to be waterproof so people could read in the bathtub and stuff. What's Kobo going to do? Well, that's actually interesting because most of their product line is due for a refresh. Everything that they're currently selling has been sort of on the market for like the last few years. The Forma is due for a refresh. The Libra is pretty new. The Clara is pretty new. The Nia just came out this year. So they probably will refresh like the Kobo Forma, but what is it going to have like that this version doesn't have? Well, it has pretty well everything that's going to do. The only thing that they could really do to like make it a key selling point is to do color. So I think if Kobo's going to refresh the Forma in 2021, they're going to do a color experience. Barnes and
I think
Noble,
so. I think Kobo's gonna be the guys to do that over Barnes and Noble. Barnes and Noble's been a mess for the last 10 years, and Amazon never paves the way. So yeah, I agree. I think if anybody, Kobo's gonna be the one to do it.
yeah, Barnes and Noble is like they've been a hot mess for like 6 or 7 years. Just like for one, a revolving door of executives and
Yeah,
CEOs. They've had like 4 or 5 CEOs in like the last like 8 years,
yeah.
and it's just like you know executives that they hired stick around for a while even
One guy
after the
says they
CEO
want the
list.
device to look like a bar of soap. The other generation says, no, I want it to look like the back of a makeup mirror that's all gold and pretty sparkles. Then some guy says, no, we want a big screen. So they use the design from 7 years ago and make a big screen version of that with huge chunky bezels. And everyone's just, they have their glasses on their head and they're squeezing the bridge of their nose because yeah, their design is just all over the map. There's no consistency, there's no character with their devices at all.
Yeah, I mean, previous executives said that they hated the Nook. Like they came out and said we can never compete against Amazon, so we should just get out of e-readers altogether. Like the person in charge of Nook said that. So there's all this been like this mixed messaging over the years just because of like so many people coming and going all the time that there was never like a memorandum on the state of the Nook and where we want to take this. Because every time like a CEO was like outlining their vision, within a year he was gone. So what's changed? Well, Barnes and Noble got sold to Elliott, sort of like a holdings company. They took it from being a public company that was pretty well reliant on quarterly revenues to like to be a financially viable company. So they took it from public to private. And what that allows them to do is really sort of like invest in their brand. So before they actually focus on the Nook, they need to focus on book selling, fundamentally changing the book selling experience, like from giving stores more control over the books that they stock, the way that they organize their stores, the way that like they present everything. In the past, everything was like dictated from New York. So if you were like a bookstore, Peter, in Seattle, and you had a Barnes and Noble store, you couldn't like change like the look and feel of everything because that was mandated from New York. So if New York was like, Peter, you need to like really promote this author on like, you know, the key stuff. You need to like really like, you know, put posters in the window of this. So every Barnes and Noble had to do that. So what's
But then
changed
I
is,
might say, in my particular region, we're not selling very well based on your particular region. New York is not your vision of what's supposed to be Barnes and Noble in New York is not doing well in Nebraska, is not doing well in North Carolina, because it can't be blanket because the states are so vastly different from state to state.
and city to city and region to region. So
That's
that's
right.
basically what's changing. Barnes and Noble is going to let you sort of like set things up the way that you want, to presentate it the way that you want. You know, basically they want you to be like an indie bookseller where like you could like have more control over the overall experience in the store. So that's not going to change overnight because most of the Barnes and Noble retail stores, they're still like in malls. And who's going to malls? Well, for instance, they're all closed right now, but generally malls
Yeah.
in the US are like dying. And you could just like look at like a lot of YouTube videos on like the state of malls, and it's like they were popular in the 80s, the early 90s, and before that like the amount of malls in the US are like halved. There's like a YouTube series of like guys that just like visit abandoned malls and just like have fun in all these like busted up like old malls and stuff. And it's like literally like overnight the entire mall's closed, or they lose like one huge tenant and like no one's going there anymore because it's like um if you're like a big mall, you have like huge like square footage devoted towards like, you know, JC Penney and like all these other like big brands. But if they go bankrupt, you're losing suddenly like your number one
Yeah.
tenant, and all the little tenants just aren't like making up the amount that to make like the mall viable anymore. And that's why like all these malls close.
I'm just
So
gonna say really quick on that. I went down to the states in Washington last year, and there was this mall near the outlet malls in Marysville, Washington, Marysville, Washington, near the outlet mall, Seattle Premium Outlets. I went to this mall. It had a huge Chuck E. Cheese, a theater, and the rest of the mall must have been no fooling, must have been 30 tenant units just with the gates closed down. It was one floor mall, but if that Chuck E. Cheese and that movie theater, I don't know what a movie theater is doing there anyways, but if those two guys are gone, the mall is toast. And yeah, they totally anchor malls on the big players, the JC Penney's, the Macy's, the whatever big player they have on the edge, you know, the one that you can enter the mall, you can enter the store from the outside or from the inside, that kind of place,
yeah.
Target or whatever. Unless you have that just hanging on to it, dude, have you ever been in some of these malls on like I-5 in Washington, and you go in and you look at like the stores, you know, like Spencer's and Hot Topic, they're just gone, just rows and rows. There might be like a sunglasses hut and a cell phone repair shop that sells screen protectors for $2.95. That's all you're gonna find.
Yeah, so basically what Barnes and Noble's waiting for like all these like leases that they prepaid for, like they sign like 2 or 3 year leases. They're waiting for like a lot of these like mall leases to expire, close down a store, and then open up like a, you know, like a one floor boutique style bookstore
Yeah.
in like a downtown urban center that's close to where people are. They're sort of getting rid of like sort of like the book superstores that they were known for and moving to smaller, more like carbon friendly footprints. For one, they're paying less rent, and two, it's like they're going to where their shoppers are. You know, shoppers now are not going to malls. So I mean, fundamentally Barnes and Noble has their priorities right now. It's like fixing their bookstores. It's not releasing a new Nook. So uh the CEO of Barnes and Noble is bullish on the future of the Nook. like he's told me that like he values the Nook, he values the ecosystem. Like it still generates millions of dollars a year for them. So I mean, it's important to them. It's not as important as fixing up their bookstore chain, which has been like broken for like a decade. That's the priority. So generally, I don't really think that we'll see a new Nook in 2021. And for all the reasons I've outlined, that's the reason why. Pocketbook, they're probably going to be refreshing almost like their entire product line this year. Everything from like the Aqua 2 from 3 years ago, they'll probably do something with that. The InkPad Pro, the InkPad like Plus, their Touch Lux 5, they're
Pocketbook
gonna,
has a lot of devices. Like,
yeah.
man, the amount of 6-inch devices, I think they have like seven. Two Aquas, a couple Luxes, basic Lux, the basic, the Touch Lux, the Touch HD, the Touch HD limited edition, and not to mention the InkPad Pro, the InkPad X, and the Color. And they have a lot of devices under their belt. And reason why, they're very, very price efficient, and they ship to all of the corners of the world, especially Western and Eastern Europe, like Poland, Moldova, Luxembourg, all those countries that don't have access to the Kindles and Kobos of the world. They maybe want something to their language, something with Greek script, something with Arabic. And that's where Pocketbook comes in. They've been in the game for over a decade and they have every language under their belt. So it's very easy to pick up a Pocketbook in any country, start it up and say, hey, there's 40 different languages. There's Hangul, there's Japanese. You just click on it and away you go.
Yeah, so they're gonna do. I know that they're gonna do a second generation Pocketbook Color with the Kalito 2. It would probably come out like around like pre-orders would probably start around like March or April. And it'll probably be released in like May or June, similar to like the first generation Pocketbook Color. Their general e-readers like ranging in size from like 6 to 10.3 inches. They'll probably refresh those and kind of get rid of like the previous generations ones, because there's basically their product line is getting kind of muddled because they
It
continue to
is.
sell e-readers from like 2018 in 2020, and it's just like
Yeah.
their product line gets really muddled, so they really rely on resellers like kind of Goody Reader to really
Mm-hmm.
push particular models. Like for me, I'm not interested in selling like in 2020 devices that were made like 3 years ago. There's just like fundamentally because like the price really hasn't dropped and the price is the same for each new generation, they may as well buy the latest generation, because like
That's
you'll
right.
just have more value over like the long term.
And there's
So
no reason to buy, say, an Aqua 2 because all of their other devices are starting to get IPX waterproof certibility. So why would you buy a device that is only a selling point to be waterproof when you can buy all these other things that are already waterproof? So they have so much overlap. They have luxury items that are spin-offs of basic items that are still in production, that are continuations of regular items. It's actually getting too confusing to the point where me and the video production team have been talking about making a video to, uh, you know, just kind of explain all this, like we did with Onyx, like we did with Amazon, like we did with Color E-Ink. The next one we're actually planning on the docket is the Kobo video, because it's a very relevant 10-year kind of anniversary. But Pocketbook should be right around the corner for that, because they've been around for about 10 years and there's some explaining to do, basically.
yeah, so looking at other companies that
Onyx. Let's
so
talk about Onyx because they have released an army of e-readers this year. It's basically has been the year of Onyx.
yeah, they refreshed their entire product line.
Yeah, whole thing. They re-released the Max early on with a black version, got rid of the white version. They released a new number 3 of the Note, the Nova, and the Poke. They released the Lumi, of course. They released the Poke 2 Color. They released a lot of things this year,
The Note
and
Air.
the Note Air. That's right. I completely forgot about that. And yeah, there's no signs of slowing down. Onyx was first to do color with Android and Google Play certification, and it would be arguable to say that currently Onyx has the most relevant note-taking system on the market. They're the most widespread. They have the most different screen size variations. Remarkable's fantastic. Sony's great, but Sony's built 4 years ago. Remarkable's just that one unit, no glow light. Onyx has the most widespread range of devices. I don't like the big screen. I can buy 7.8. Oh, I don't like 10.3s. 13.3 is great for me. It's gigantic, and Onyx is the only company to have it. So likely, what's next for Onyx would be color note taking. It'd be safe to say.
Yeah, so they filed an FCC application when they were releasing their sort of their threes like this year when they refreshed all their product line. They did like pre-certification for color variants of every single one. So Ian Kalito 2 won't work on 13.3 inch screens, but they will work on 10.3 inch screens. So I think that Onyx will probably refresh all of their e-readers next year, like Poke 3 color, Note 3 color, Nova 3 color, sort of do like, I don't know if they'll do a color version of the Note Air. I don't think that they'll continue making the Note Air past like this year. So when they refresh it next year, I think the Note Air was like a runoff, like a one-off.
It's a spin-off one-off device to compete with the Remarkable. The elephant in the room is no longer an elephant in the room. The thing looks exactly like the Remarkable. Has the asymmetrical design, the two-tone strip on the side, the magnet snap to the side of the device. It's exactly the same design and idea-wise. The way they're pushing it out there is the exact same thing. So, yeah, I don't think they're going to continue with the Air given
No.
everything else on their plate, as
Yeah.
well as the upcoming insurgence of color.
Yeah, they're not going to do like a Note Air 2. So don't I am almost like 100% that just because like they limited parts, so like limited
Yeah.
amount of cases, limited amount of styli, like they don't even like they're almost like sold out of the Note Air stylus, and a lot of people just don't like it because it doesn't have an eraser on the top like all the other
Yeah.
Onyx products. So even though it's like a cool device, it's just like all the, because like none of the previous Onyx accessories really kind of work with it,
Mhm.
that it was just like a dark horse. So yeah, I don't see them doing anything with it past this year. So talking about Remarkable,
I was gonna, yeah, a bunch of people in the chat want to talk about that. So yeah, go for it.
yeah, so they will not make a new version of Remarkable for at least like 2 to 3 years. Primarily because like, although that the Remarkable 2 came out this year, and like we reviewed it like, during the summer, so we got it like before even the batch 1 people got it, just because we're press and we're good readers. So I mean, they've been really good to us over the years. So I probably see Remarkable 2 stock stabilizing in 2021. I don't even see them thinking about a new e-reader until 2023. Remarkable is generally like, if you look at the release date between Remarkable 1 and a Remarkable 2, is generally about like 3 years, give or take. So they probably will wait probably around 2 or 3 years before they release a new one. And generally, who knows what the state of color e-ink at that time will be, but they'll probably use color e-paper at that time. One thing about Remarkable that they just did this week is that if you have a Remarkable 2, they're now selling the accessories on their store. So you could
Yes.
buy Remarkable 2 replacement nibs, all of the cases, like the book case and the folio case. You can buy the marker plus stylus, the premium stylus. You can buy the basic marker stylus. So basically, up until like this week, you had to buy all that stuff at checkout, but you couldn't even buy replacement nibs during checkout. So
No.
if you got the first batch like 2 or 3 months ago, and your nibs were like running low, you didn't have any option.
That's it.
You
No.
couldn't buy replacement nibs. So
No.
basically, I wrote a huge story on this about 2 weeks ago on how Remarkable should be doing this, and they're disservicing their customers that like had waited for 8 months to get this e-reader, and maybe they just didn't consider the premium stylus at that time, or
That's
maybe they had been using this and ran out of nibs, and what are they going to do?
And we actually contacted their PR, and we told them, because we actually sell the Remarkable products in our store. And I'll just do a quick plug. We understand that if you guys are in Canada and America, you have access to them. That's not the reason. There's a lot of people in the world. There's hundreds of countries in the world: Papua New Guinea, Andorra, Chile, Brazil. Can't buy Remarkable there. If you did want one, we can help facilitate getting you one. And we contacted Remarkable PR and we said, look, we're good e-reader. I mean, we're not, king of the world, but we're king of e-readers. And when we get emails and YouTube comments and phone calls and text messages saying, where can I get a pen? Where can I get a pen? Where can I get a pen? We contacted PR at Remarkable and we said, look, we have inquiries, upwards of 190 people, no joke, that require parts for your products that you made them wait 8 months for. Some people are just getting their stuff now. They ordered in April. So with the news publication team on Mike's end and the PR team and our PR team contacting their PR team, everything amalgamated together, and we believe because of all the press involved that they released their parts separately. Because yeah, it's important that if you break your nib, you're not going to go, duh, what am I going to do?
Or break your stylus, lose your stylus.
You should be able to go to the company that supplied you the things and get the parts for it. So you shouldn't have to rely on warranty claims and RMAs. So yeah, you can now buy them, and we're reselling the Remarkable styluses as well. Again, if you live in a place that sells Remarkable, just get it from them. That's totally fine. We're servicing the people that do not have access to these items. By all means, do some shopping, and if you do find some relevancy in purchasing through us, we'd love to help you out.
Okay, so let's quickly talk about other brands that you may have heard of.
Let's go Boyu, because you broke that story, Mike, on Boyu's updates that have just came out, but they were still behind the curve. What happened there?
Yeah, so there's two models, I think, like the Muses and the Mimas, that haven't got 8.1 yet. But this is like the first year that I can think of that they've never released a new product. Their offices were at the epicenter, like near Wuhan. So, they were really kind of hit hard and disrupted the entire supply chain. So I'm not really surprised that they didn't release anything new this year, just given the current state of affairs. So I think like in 2021, like book, they'll probably redo the Mars, because that was one of their most successful devices ever. Like generally, I think that they'll probably refresh half of their product line, whether it's with color or whether it's just like Android 10, and just like moderate spec increases, faster processor, more internal storage, more RAM, just kind of making their e-readers a little bit more current. I think would go a long way. Whether they use color, which I don't think that they will.
Nah, they're a little bit behind the trend right now and everything.
Yeah.
They suffered in 2020. They didn't release a thing. They released a couple Android updates, which were just 2 gens behind current. And no discredit to Boyu. Boyu's top notch. They're still one of the only devices that pioneered note taking with the Mimas. They have a full size line, everything from 7.8 to 10.3. They have styluses support. They have replacement nibs under their own house. They have their own UI. They don't skin from anyone else. They build their own stuff. They have a lot of positives. 2020 hit really hard for Boyu, and they need to get some coming back before they can pioneer any sort of color, we think.
Yeah, I mean, to be fair, a lot of the stuff that they're selling in 2020 was made like during the course of
2019.
Yeah, like the Mars 2018, but most of the other e-readers that they didn't discontinue, that they're still selling, were made 2019. So I mean, by e-reader standards, they're pretty current. You don't have to refresh your product line every year when it comes to e-readers.
Although it feels like people do, right?
Yeah, exactly. So other brands, Supernote, they just released like their A6X this year and discontinued the A6. They will be releasing the A5X, which is their 10.3-inch device.
I'm looking forward to that one.
So next, they developed it, it's done. They just need FCC certification. So it'll come probably like Q1 of like next year. They were hoping to get it done for Christmas, but backlog of FCC and other regulatory stuff really kind of hampered them.
You see,
But
Supernote's interesting because people are lumping Supernote in with Onyx and Boyu, thinking that they're this one and all fully loaded device, and that's not what Supernote is about. Supernote, although has the same size variations as these all-in-one fully loaded devices, they are note-taking centric and note-taking only. They have digital stationery, they have proprietary rubber screen protector over the device. They're pushing note-taking as the first and foremost and only feature they want to focus on. They don't want to focus on apps. They give the people what they want though, and they finally put the Amazon app on the Supernote devices, but they want to focus on note-taking first and foremost. That's why they have cases and screen protectors and replacement nibs and styluses that rival nobody. They're top-notch for digital stationery right now.
yeah, so that's one reason I like the brand, is just because like a lot of brands they just have basic styluses that they sell. They don't really
Yeah.
give people an option for more of a premium type of stylus. And Supernote's proven that like they can charge $69 for an all aluminum stylus that weighs like 24 grams, that feels really
That's
nice in
right.
the hands, and has like 12 different like color like variations
Yeah.
that so people could get like Pittsburgh cloud or polka dot red and stuff like that, just different colors, gunmetal silver. I mean, there's a lot of options there. So
Yeah.
yeah, Supernote, just their A5X will just be like running Android instead of Linux, easier to upgrade and stuff like that. It'll be shipped with Kindle from day one. So that's what they're doing. They're not changing the world, but they are increasing the specs from their first gen, from a single core processor to like an octa-core processor. So things will be increased there. Boyu out of France, they're not going to release any new e-readers. They refreshed their product lineup with the Diva and Diva HD
That's
earlier
right.
this year,
Yeah.
and they're generally like on 3-year product cycles, so they're not going to do anything like next year. So brands that you haven't heard of, there's an awful lot of them. There's
Moby
like,
Scribe.
yeah, MobiScribed, a lesser known company for crowdfunding.
iFlyTech released the AI Note, which they refuse to do business anywhere outside of China. We actually have contacted them on a personal basis, as close as WeChat, cell phones in our pocket to cell phones in our pocket kind of communication. And when we finally asked them about the AI Note, they said they are not interested in any sort of business outside of China whatsoever. So they sent us the iFlyTech C1, which is the color device, but they just refuse to do any sort of business with their note-taking device. It's a China-only device. We won't be seeing it. They just
Yeah,
won't send it.
so
Yeah,
there's like like the Xiaomi Mi
right.
Mia reader, like there's a lot of like sort of Chinese exclusives that
Yeah.
I really don't want to talk about, because it's just designed for one specific market and it doesn't even have English on it. So there's really sort of like no point. I mean,
And we've tried. I mean, we've sealed some deals with, I think, 4 or 5 manufacturers over 2020, just with the Chinese brands. Building synergy, seeing if we can get some international availability. It's just the same thing over and over again. This one's stuck in this ecosystem. This one's stuck in that ecosystem.
yeah, they're just tremendously limited. Like you have to sideload in your own ebooks to like read them like in English, and that's possible. But the UI and everything is just all in Chinese, so it's just severely limiting for like the Western world, where like English is predominantly spoken, but
Yeah.
switching it to other languages is ideal, which is like why we kind of focus more on our news publication. We write about all
Right.
the Chinese e-readers. If there's a new Taiwan e-reader that just came out that's only like in like Mandarin or something
Yeah.
like that, we talk about it because it's
We
it's it's
are we
newsworthy.
we're on the board to deal with anyone and everyone that has to do with e-readers and e-ink, and we'll definitely yeah, we'll definitely team up with everyone. There, you did get a company in Taiwan to send us one, Mike. What was that one? Remember, they sent it to us. It was
Moo Ink.
Taiwan made. Moo Ink. That was right. Great device, beautifully built. Only Mandarin. So like when we got into it, we're like, this looks nice and it feels good. It's nicely weighted. It's tightly built. It's good materials. Couldn't do anything with it. I think we did an unboxing. We didn't even do a review because I can't get
How
past
do you
the.
review, like we've
You
reviewed a
can't.
lot of Chinese only devices, and it's like we can only say so many times like we need Google Lens to just like read the UI,
Yeah, we've had to do reviews with Google Lens via AR, hovering over the screen as I'm like, okay, oh, that's settings. You click on it, and it's a page of Chinese text, and you're like, man, this is great if you live in mainland China, but unfortunately, to the rest of the world, your product is not that viable because you just can't read it, can't
Yeah.
interact with it.
So even on
Let
our
me talk
live
about. Oh,
show,
sorry. Go
I'm
ahead. Yeah,
not
go
gonna
ahead.
like talk about what's next for like all these Chinese companies because like who
No,
really cares? Like
it's yeah.
I know that like Hisense, when they released their e-ink smartphones, they did it just in China, but they had Android and it had English and
Beautiful.
it's like support for all these different languages. So Hisense is going to refresh most of their products in 2021. It's not exactly e-readers, but they really sort of proved this year that there's a huge market for e-ink devices, both
Someone in the
color
chat
and
said
black and
that.
white.
Yeah, someone in the chat said that is that 2021 is they're going to see a resurgence in e-ink smartphones, and I think they're onto something because there have been e-ink phones before. They've been the I think the Light phone, the Kingro, Yoda phone secondary panel, Siswu R9. We've seen
The mythical Onyx Boox phone
that
2.
one as well. We've seen the Onyx Boox phones at trade shows ourselves, but we've never seen a phone like the Hisense A5 line, and it's never been as good as those. Those are good. You pick it up, you use it, it's color. You have no color options, you have color options, you have premium options, fingerprint sensor, dual speakers. They're great phones. I mean, they're almost to the point, almost that you could almost say I want to switch to it as my primary. Not quite, but almost. So what's 2021 going to hold for that? That could be exciting to see a lot of color e-ink phones pop up all of a sudden by other manufacturers.
Yeah, that's the most interesting thing. Like I don't think that like so from what I understand about following this type of stuff, it's mainly Chinese companies that are embracing the first generation
That's
of
right.
color. And that's like why like the vast majority of them, like the iFly Tech, the iReader, Chinese exclusives, all in Chinese, no English. But the outlier was the e-ink smartphones by Hisense, which did have English and everything like that. So they made them for your daily driver most viable. So I think that they'll redo like the A5C and the Pro CC with color. They may introduce color for their entire product line,
Yeah,
because some products sold better than others, like the A6L, which was like their dual screen
that was
e-ink
cool.
and
Yeah.
smartphone on the other screen. It was basically like a modern version of the Yoda phone. I talked to Hisense and they were disappointed with the sales for that. So I think that like with this current generation of e-ink, that some phones sold really well, mainly the color phones, and the
Yeah.
A5 Pro sold really well because it had like awesome specs. Some didn't sell so well. So I see them scaling back on their products and just like being all about color for the second generation. So you can expect that. I
Yeah.
haven't heard any rumors of a possible Onyx Boox phone, a light phone, like a Curacell, like card Kitai 2. I haven't heard anything about like even just Chinese companies experimenting with this. Like so all the established brands, not to say like a new brand may come out of the woodworks. It's possible. I mean, but it's pretty unlikely sort of at this point.
And speaking of new brands that came out of the woodworks in a way, and this is actually good 2020 news and it's relevant to this. Sony has been selling the same hardware since 2016, 2017 with the note-taking RP1. They decided to get out of the American market and actually pulled both of their operations for the digital paper out of New York and Cali. Now, they're only selling out of Japan, and very convenient for us. We have a Japan office and we're actually still selling the Sony DPT, and it's still alive today because they pulled out of there. I think Mike can elaborate on this after, but I think some patents ran out, or were up for grabs to a certain extent because two companies, one of which has been around for 60 years, picked up the pieces. Fujitsu revamped and refreshed the Sony line and is marketing it as their own. They have ad campaigns with famous actors on TV. It's called the Quaderno. It's using Sony hardware, but it's refined and it's more fresh and it's more clean. Quirk Logic out of Canada did this as well, and they made a completely skinned version with an unbranded white label Sony device. And Mike and his team said something about Sony getting into the manufacturing business rather than marketing the DPT to the end customer.
Yeah, so I mean, I don't think that there'll be like a new digital paper in 2021. They basically like seem to be getting out of e-notes altogether. When they first got into it with the DPT S1 like 4 or 5 years ago, they kind of kickstarted the digital note taking like experience. And then they
Yeah,
did like a second generation 13.3 and did a smaller 10.3 version.
yeah,
But by that time, there was just so much more competition in that space that Sony wasn't selling enough volume to really like rationalize continuing development. It was exactly the same situation with their consumer e-reader division when they were making e-readers. When they got into it, there was hardly any competition, and there was no runaway like winner. Like everyone, it was like a free for all. Everyone was making e-readers. Like some companies like Kobo just suddenly got really big really fast. Barnes and Noble like was making like, 6 or 7 billion dollars every couple of years with their nooks. Amazon was becoming a household name, but it was the Wild West. But over the years, the e-reader industry, a lot of people just disappeared, and it got like firmly entrenched on who the market leaders and stuff were. Sony realized this, and it was just like they couldn't rationalize like, they had their own ebook division where they would like approach publishers, and
yeah.
they had a publishing relations team, they had PR, they had people in charge of the Sony reader store, they had like research people like in charge of like making new models, like dealing with like outsourcing. They had a lot of like infrastructure. It's Sony, so it's like they had people, and they weren't making enough money to rationalize all these people, so they got out of it. And now they moved a few years later, they moved on to e-notes. They're out of that too. So it's like, what's the future for Sony? They tried e-readers, they got out of it. They tried e-notes, they're getting out of it. And yeah, so and then this doesn't bode well, especially for the people that white label Sony products like the Quaderno. What's the future of the Quaderno line? Are they going to do a new design?
They would have
They,
to design it from the ground up because they are 100% using Sony hardware.
yeah, exactly.
QuickLogic,
But I
they're
mean,
using Sony hardware. They don't even have logos on the devices.
what's the future of that brand
That's
though?
exactly it. Yeah,
Because
Fujitsu does a lot of stuff. They were the first to make color e-ink. They did color e-ink for years on, hospital tags and all these other applications. But now that they've revived their e-reader brand, I guess you could say 10 years later, well, now that they're using a device that's built 4 years ago today, what are they going to do next? Are they going to say, wow, okay, we sold really well, but we only sold in Japan? Or is there enough meat here to grab onto where we just, we're thinking we're too big for our heads and we white labeled a product and now we can't proceed with it because we never made our own thing? We don't know, because Fujitsu has their hands in a lot of different things. One of the biggest companies in Japan is a holdings company by Fujitsu. So like it's an estate company or something. So, it's just, they're not really an e-reader company. They dipped their hands in back in 09. They dipped their hands in again 2019. They're not really an e-reader company. We don't know what's going to happen with those guys.
yeah, so for all the companies that relied on white labeling Sony hardware, what's next for it? It remains to be seen. I guess it really depends on how many units of their existing product line that they sell. If they sell 100,000 units, 50, 200,000 units, well, then they have the working capital to devote towards making their own design, making that a new product line instead of white labeling. Basically white labeling Sony was cost effective because they didn't have to like
Sure.
invest in
They had
they
warehouses full of parts that you're just like, I'll take 100 of those and you're
yeah,
done. Yeah, that's
exactly.
it.
All you had to do is to just like revise like the software, which
That's
was
it.
easy because like Sony provided them with an SDK for them to do it. But
Yeah.
are they selling enough of the Quadrino line, or is QuarkLogic selling enough of the papers that it's giving them enough working capital to be able to design their own device from scratch?
Yeah,
Because like they can't white label a now 6-year-old device. Like what are they going to do? They can't. They just can't. Like
you
they
can't.
they basically like with QuarkLogic and the Fujitsu Quadrino line, it's all a matter of how long they could build like their existing product line for, and how much, how many units are they selling. This will give us an indication on whether they'll do something different, or maybe Sony will release like a new DPT, but they won't sell it. They'll just
That's
license the
yeah.
hardware out. They'll just make an exclusive white label version that they won't sell themselves, but they'll license out to other people. I could see them doing that, because they have like all the DPT hardware construction and software was all done in Japan. And
That's right.
Sony Japan for the DPT line is still unoperational. So it is still possible for them to be able to do something like that. But I believe that they're moving more into a white label direction for their company, like a B2B type of thing, rather than like business to customers, B2C.
I
So
think that if anyone's going to do it out of the guys, Sony's not going to come back. QuarkLogic's not going to do anything. If anyone is, Fujitsu is, because they have a track record of half a decade and they have the company behind it. They have the resources to put TV ads out on mainstream TV nationwide with famous actors playing parts. And one guy drops a big bucket full of paper and the other guy's like, I got my Quadrino. You know what I mean? So QuarkLogic is probably a one and done, one off thing that's like, they just bought some blank slates when they actually their device is great. Well, their software, but the device has no branding on it. The pen has no branding, and the box is a plain brown box with a little sticker on it. So they didn't go the extra mile to actually brand the units themselves. Whereas Fujitsu has their own digital paper application, the Fujitsu app, the Fujitsu pen, the Fujitsu replacement stuff, proprietary cases they built for it. So they really went the extra mile to make something of the brand. I think, to answer your question, what are the two white labelers going to do? I think QuarkLogic's going to drop off, and then Fujitsu might do something. It won't be color though, and it will rely on Sony.
yeah, so
We
to
talked
sum
about
it,
all the major brands actually.
yeah.
I'm looking at my piece of paper here. We touched on Supernote, Remarkable, Amazon Kobo, Pocketbook, Onyx, Boyu, MobiScribe, everybody. So even Bokin, which I didn't even have written down, but you caught that. So I don't really have anything else on my paper.
Yeah, so to give you guys an indication on what's next for e-readers and e-notes for 2021, that's basically it. Like
Yeah,
color is going to be like a big thing, just because it's going to change everything.
I think
Um,
so.
so we over like the last few weeks, there's been a lot of people asking what's up with TCL next
Oh
paper.
yeah, it didn't come up today, but yeah, actually every week live we've done, someone has asked. So
Yeah,
take it.
so what they told me is that they're never going to release their own product that uses TCL Next Paper. They're not going to release an e-reader. They're not going to release a tablet. They're not going to release a smartphone. They're only licensing this tech out to other companies. So basically, like they'll license out their TCL Next Paper tech. They'll manufacture the screens like and stuff for them, but they won't actually do the construction. Like batteries and motherboards and logic like layer and stuff. They're not going to do any of that. They'll just do the screen tech. It's similar to the business model e-ink does, where like they'll have like logic boards and they have e-paper screens, and that's basically it. So they'll manufacture and then sell those screens to an end user, and then the company actually has to deal with an existing fab or something like that to source the motherboard and the batteries and the RAM and the internal storage and yada 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 yada. So that's what's going on with TCL Next Paper. So likely something will happen in 2021, but it probably won't be towards like the end of the year, like fall winter. So a full year from now.
And especially the unforeseen uh what do you call landscape of the virus and everything. We don't know what's going to happen. So Those are all the brands and those are all the topics for today. So we, honestly, we have had a lot of chat, but it's all mostly chat amongst the people in chat. It's quite nice to see everyone's kind of weighing in and answering each other's questions, which is very nice. So we don't have a whole lot of questions, but we do have some. RZ Etlin said, I want to see the big e-reader companies like Kindle and Kobo release color e-readers. We just touched on that. RZ, that we said that if anyone's going to do it, Kobo will probably do it, not Amazon, because Amazon kind of trails behind and then ends up doing it better. So that's probably what's going to happen there. John Rogers says, what is the best 6 to 7 inch that is waterproof and not Amazon? I think someone said in the chat that the Kobo Forma is waterproof. Mike, do you remember offhand, or am I going to have to use Mr. Google to find that? Oh, you are. I hear you clicking away. I think it has IPX7 rating. I can't remember offhand. The Libra H2O obviously is H2O. Mike is gonna clicky clacky away on his keyboard and find out if indeed the format is.
Yeah, it's IPX8.
Oh, 8. Oh, yeah.
So it's 60 minutes and 6 feet of like fresh water.
Yeah. So technically it's not a 6 or 7 inch because it is an 8 inch, but at the same point, it is a very good e-reader and it is by a company that has been around for a long time. So that would be a suggestion from us. Let's see here. What would you recommend for note-taking, Remarkable 2 or Note Air? I have touched on this multiple occasions and it's literally the question that we get 20 times a day. The Remarkable can do what the Remarkable can do, but the Onyx can do everything the Remarkable can do and more. It has a glow light, it has Android. People will complain and say it's distraction free on the Remarkable. You are correct, but if you uninstall everything and don't download Facebook and Clash of Clans on your Onyx Boox, it's just as distraction free as the Remarkable, and you get the same magnetic pen. You can use either pen on either one. You can buy Remarkable pens and use them on the Onyx Air. The Onyx Air is not necessarily better, but it has more features and it does more and it does the same thing. So unless you had something to add on that, Mike.
Yeah, the thing is that you can buy an Air today and have it like in a couple weeks. If you want to buy, you want to buy the Remarkable 2, if you buy today, you're not going to get into like February or March of like next year. So
I think
if you have time to wait, cool. Remarkable 2 is like perfectly viable. I mean, they have like a really good marketing team and like they do like really good online advertising. So it's like if you're on Facebook or Twitter, they like advertise the hell out of like those platforms. So that's why like they've really done a good job of like a startup company building like really good brand identity, and like they really play nice with like the media. So it's like when a Remarkable 2 came out, every single big tech blog like in the world was like reviewing it. So whereas with a new Onyx comes out, there's hardly anybody really talking about it. So the Remarkable 2 and just Remarkable as a brand is just like more well known than like say like the Onyx brand and stuff like that. So my suggestion is like is a front light important to you? Is a distraction-free experience like good for you? If so, get the Remarkable.
If having speakers are important to you and the ability to download applications from third-party sources are important to you, then the Onyx would be fantastic.
Yeah.
You'd like this, Mike. Someone just called me a caveman because I guess it got out that I was taking notes on my desk on paper. He's like, this caveman still uses paper, and they're like, why aren't you using an e-reader or something? And
you're a Luddite.
I've let down the entire brand of good e-reader by not using a note-taking tablet. Oh, I'm so sorry. Yeah. Moving on. Someone says, is there a better e-note taker than the Nova 3 at that price range? Better? No, not necessarily. The same, yes, you can go with Boyu Aries. That would be around the same price range, but Onyx is pretty much top of the class when it comes to note-taking e-readers, and you could argue that all day long, but Supernote
the A6X is perfectly good. I think that's 7.82.
Yeah, but the A6X does far less, and it's roughly the same price. Sony is huge, and they have a great note-taking feel, but their old as a dinosaur. MobiScribe is insignificant. I mean, there's very few choices out there right now outside of Onyx. It just seems like they're cornering the market with the mass amount of releases, the differences in sizes, the new pens they released, and the fact that they're available now. And like Mike said, with the Remarkable, you don't have to wait till batch 25 to get your thing. So, um, better's in the eye of the beholder. But right now, Onyx is on paper the best at their game. They have the highest processors, the most RAM, the highest storage, the latest version of Android. I mean, you can't argue the specs on paper. So, to Michael here, haven't Wacom's EMR patents expired? I wonder if that's why more and more EMR devices have have become available recently.
No, what they've been doing is like they've been running like the Wacom Connected Ink like place in I believe Japan and a few other countries recently, and they've really been doubling down on doing business like in Asia. And so that's why like a lot of suddenly you've seen an explosion of brands coming from outside like in Asia, but like being like marketed outside of China. So you have like Japanese companies and Chinese companies primarily that are using Wacom like displays, and that's just like Wacom's marketing and Wacom like actually hosting events in like those countries to you know get executives all in one room and for them to be able to like hype up like their new tech. Like Wacom was showing off like their color displays before e-ink officially even announced like they were working on it. So they were showing, that's why like we broke the story, because we got invited to like this event. So Peter was at Connected Ink in Japan and we did like the worldwide exclusive on like color e-ink and color e-ink digital note-taking devices. And eventually 6 or 7 months later it was in the hands of consumers. So to answer your question, yes, the patent has not expired, but about Wacom is doubling down in a number of companies that it is approaching and signing up to like license their tech.
Nice. Okay. Nice. Someone says the best e-reader, please. That's actually something we mentioned at the beginning of the video, that we have finalized the article on the top 10s that Mike and the news publication did. And for the YouTube audience, if you want to see something a little bit more visual, we are going to produce a top 10 video for the year's end of the top 10 e-readers of all time. That should basically just answer the question. As Mike said earlier, we know more about it because we're not a general review tech company. We don't do the Samsung Galaxies. We don't do Apple iPads. We do them once in a blue moon. But we focus on e-readers. All we do is e-readers every single day. So we know everything about them. So when we have a top 10 list, we know what we're talking about. We deal with everybody in the industry, 20 manufacturers, so we're unbiased, and we push out the things that we feel are the best ones based on specs, based on objective, stats, based on user experience, based on people's, reviews and feedback, and we release the top 10. So we'll be coming up in the week to come.
So to give you a sense of like the top two, it was the Pocketbook Color and the Onyx Book Poke 2 Color, just because like they were pleasant trailblazers of 2020, just like so unlike anything else. Some of the things on our list came out last year, but most of them came out this year. But those were the two that like were considered must buys from us, just because like Pocketbook Color 199, the Onyx Book Poke 2 Color with full Android and Google Play like 279. So it hits both of the price points, like $200 versus say like $300, let's say. So you're not like paying an arm and a leg, and you are getting an experience unlike anything else that's been available up until this point.
And branching off of that, someone said the best e-reader is the Onyx Lumi. Just straight up comment. If you look at the back of the box, to technically it's the best e-reader because it's just maxed out in specs. It can do everything. It has the latest of everything compared to everything else. But remember, it's like a $900 device, and it's not even available right now because there are certain things in the market that are preventing them from selling it at this point. So sure, on paper it's, king of the crop, but in the reality is that that's really expensive and not attainable for the average person. Someone did say though, Joseph Kamhi says, any idea what Onyx is planning for the next Max 4 question mark?
Um,
And technically the Lumi is not really Max 4, but it is what they're focusing on right now. So I don't really see a Max Lumi being alongside a Max 4 because they're already pretty identical.
yeah,
So
they're not gonna
you know,
have two different SKUs for like 13.3. The
yeah,
Lumi was pretty well the Max like 4. So like I think that the Lumi was just like a really good marketing name. Whereas like, the Max 4, the Max 5,
yeah,
that's like like the Note Air was like a good name because like it hadn't been used before, easy to discover like on search engine results. Same with like Max Lumi, a good brand, easy for people to remember, not to be confused with like prior generations, like when you say like iPhone 12. It's like people just say I have an iPhone, or I have a Max,
yeah,
I have a Lumi, I have like a Note Air. Easy to
yeah.
say, just
That's
like
right.
one or two words. So I think that they'll probably do like a second generation of like of the Lumi and just focus on that naming convention rather than kind of go back to like the Maxes. Um,
But you know what? With the high price point and a little bit of a stock shortage during the holiday season, they haven't even really had a good chance to sell the Lumi, never mind next generation. You know what I mean? Like they hit a lot of hurdles as it was, hasn't even been sold for that long.
Yeah, I mean, if they release like a new Lumi next year, what will it have? It'll have a higher version of a Snapdragon processor. It'll have
Yeah.
more RAM, more internal storage. It already has like a front light. So I mean, really, what could they really do other than offering Android 11? Just like
Another
incremental.
device to justify another Android level.
Yeah, it's just like
Yeah,
it's what Onyx does. It's just
I
like
know.
incremental
Yeah.
updates every year where it's like
Yeah.
the version you're getting this year is subtly better than the one next year. But if you look back 2 generations, it's a huge upgrade, like
Yeah,
you're going from
it
like
is.
2 gigs of RAM to like 6 gigs of RAM. You're moving to like a 13.3 with a front light or a 13.3 without a front light.
Yeah.
If you look towards like a year on year upgrade cycle for Onyx, there really isn't a huge difference year on year. But if you buy an e-reader, like say if you have the Max 2 and then you look at the
Yeah,
Max
yeah, yeah.
Lumi, it's a huge upgrade.
That's
But
huge. Yeah.
yeah, but if you have like a Max 3 Pro, the Lumi is not necessarily like a huge upgrade other than
That's
if a
exactly it.
light is that important to you.
Yeah. One more question, then we can get into your little quick bits, Mike. Or two more, I guess. I'm just going to glance over one because we mentioned it. Brian Chu asked, "Is there a new Paperwhite on the horizon?" It was a little late to the question, Brian. If you go back in the VOD and watch the second segment of this video, we touch on whether or not there'll be a new Paperwhite and what it'll bring to the table. The actual last question here is, what is your opinion? Are there any chance that the smaller e-readers will come back? I would like to see another Pyrus Mini or Kobo Mini with or without a front light. I'll touch on this and then I'll throw it over to Mike really quick. The Kobo Mini did have a resurgence. It was out, got completely canned. It came back for a final blitz, 29 bucks Canadian, we remember. And I remember we ourselves bought four for a bunch of the staff back in the day, just as little, end of year gifts, because I remember it came out around fall. And then it was gone forever. And we haven't seen a small e-reader unless you count the Texter Beagle, which ran off batteries and was just a massive rolling dumpster fire. It was just
I remember
terrible.
that one.
It was terrible, man. Oh my gosh. But yeah, Mike, what do you think about the viability of a small e-reader, sub 6 inch?
No, it's like not viable. I mean, a lot of people in the last 4 or 5 years have even just said 6 inches is too small.
Right? Yeah, people are complaining
Like,
about that.
yeah, I mean, people are just spoiled by huge flagship smartphones being like 6.8 inches or more. Like my iPhone 12, like Pro Max is like 6.8 inch screen.
Yeah.
It's like it's, it's not as square as an e-reader, but like
Yeah.
height and width wise, it's huge. So yeah, I mean, even a lot of people these days find that 6 inches is too small for an e-reader, and that's like why there's such a huge size difference when it comes to e-readers these days. They mainly start 6 inches, but there's a lot that are like 7, 8, 9 inches or larger. So it all depends on like a lot of factors. Like, yeah, there's a lot of things. Like, do you want something small? Do you have good eyesight? Do you don't have good eyesight and you just want a larger screen e-reader so you can put the fonts up bigger, but more text at a bigger font will
Yeah.
appear on the screen at any given time, like a bold font. Like if you try to read a bold font on like a 6 inch screen, there's not very much room for text. On a 5 inch screen, there's even less of it.
Once upon a time. Oh, that's great. And it's slow too, because all these smaller devices that you guys are mentioning are made a long time ago. So they were very small, and they were very slow. And as Queen Cats just mentioned, there's no glow light. So yeah, enough people are complaining about 6 inch devices now, and now they have color and octa-core processors and Google Play. People are still complaining about it. I doubt they're going to make 5 inch devices now that phones are bigger than that. I mean, yeah, the iPhone Pro, whatever you said, Mike, Pro Max, whatever, XS, is probably bigger in just surface area dimensions than a Kobo Mini. No one's going to have any viability to say, I'm going to read on my Kobo Mini. If I'm going to use an e-ink device, I'll have it be note-taking. I'll have it be at least 7.8, whatever. I don't think the small guys are coming back.
Yeah.
And I'll say one more thing. When the Nia was coming out, we had suspected that it was going to be the Kobo Mini 2. Then when it came and it landed in our store, our offices, we opened it up and we're just like, oh, a 6 inch. And we're just, shaking our heads at it. So yeah.
Yeah, 6 inches just like blase. Yeah, I mean, just phones in general are just getting bigger and bigger these days. So is there room in a product line to go sub 6 inches? It's pocket friendly, but I mean, you look at like when these devices first came out, it was like 6 to 7 years ago or more. And this was, these came out in an era where phone screens weren't that big. Like iPhone 3, like iPhone 3ish, iPhone
The
4ish.
Sony
Like,
Xperia.
yeah, like flip phones, like from the Matrix, like, click,
Yeah.
those were getting popular. Just
From
like
the Matrix.
the Motorola Razr, sort of, if you
The
look at that
Razor
era
and the
of,
Crazer.
you look at those smartphones, those were all small screens. So
Yeah.
a 5 inch e-reader compared to phones at those time were quite large. And there was like
Yeah.
the whole reason that you could have it pocket friendly, or like
And
put in my
then,
back
yeah.
pocket, and like
And then
it
fast
actually
forward
fits.
7 years later, once we're just spoiled by these large screen tablets and supercomputers in our pockets, you think of the viability of a 5 inch screen and you're like, no, I'm not going to buy that. Unless it's $19, I'm not going to buy that.
Yeah, and to make like, okay, so here's a little like trick of e-reader manufacturing. Most e-readers carry the same design generation to generation. The molds, the way that the e-reader is designed and constructed, it's easy to just like swap out components inside when you already have 100,000 like front chassis and rear back plates, and then you just like put in a new logic board, put in like the motherboard. There you go, USB-C instead micro USB, easy. So when you look at each Kindle generation, they all look the same. If you look at like each Kobo generation, more or less they all look the same. The Forma and the Libra buck the trend because they use asymmetrical designs instead of just like
Yeah.
the standard black chunky bezels. Most companies like use the same construction, like the Supernote A6X use the same body as the
Exact
A6
same.
because like
Yeah.
they already had the molds done. They already had like all the industrial design done. They already had like all the CAD files saved on storage. So that's why like a lot of e-readers always look the same generation to generation, and the only thing that really changes is like the internal specs. That's why. So if you were to make a 5-inch device, you have no frame of reference. You have to devote like manpower and engineers to like, you just can't like take the Kobo Mini and just like refresh it to today's standards, because for that time it just everything about that e-reader was dated. So
Yeah.
you have no frame of reference. And is there okay, so I know a lot about e-reader manufacturing. So basically, to make a run of around 100,000 units from scratch costs anywhere between 3.1 and 5.1 million dollars. So it's a significant financial barrier just for 100,000 units. So if
Of
you're a
one thing.
yeah, one thing.
Yeah.
So if you want to do 500,000, that's about like a 8 to 10 million dollar investment. Are you going to make that investment in the hopes that people are going to buy a 5-inch e-reader? And is enough people going to buy a 5-inch e-reader at $99 that you're going to recoup or make a profit on this like $10 million outline?
And remember that
Probably not.
most people used to use their devices, their consumer electronic devices, for many, many years at a time. That's shortening. Recently, people feel the need to upgrade every 6 months, every 8 months, every year. And if you don't believe me, some major manufacturers are making 2 flagship phones per year now. The iPhone makes an entire new generation every single year, and then they revamp the older stuff to sell like the SE at a little bit of a discount for the current people that can't buy the new thing. So the window in which people, the time frame in which people used to have their, I have my 6-year-old e-reader, it's like, no, I have my Oasis 3, I bought it at the beginning of this year, I need something new, even though I spent $4 on it. So not only that, Mike, that do you have to think about, oh, I have to house and store 500,000 units, 500,000 units. By
Yeah.
the time I'm even done selling half of them, are they obsolete? Am I going to luck out like Sony, or am I going to dive bomb like maybe Boyu and not release anything for 2020? And I have all this stock and I can't make anything. I can't sell anything. There's so much pressure nowadays, more than ever, to buy something new, to just get rid of your thing that's not even a year old and get something new. It's dangerous.
Yeah, and I mean, some phone manufacturers offer upgrade programs, like
Apple, yeah.
subscription based programs that you could like pay a monthly
Yep.
fee and then you're just like upgraded to the latest and greatest like automatically. A lot of phones too and this is what phone companies do, where like you can trade in your old phone and get like, $200 or $300 off a new phone. Kids, if I were to like get the iPhone 13 Pro Max and trade in like my 12 Pro Max, I would get significantly more money than if I traded in an iPhone 11 Pro Max or an iPhone 10 XS Max. Like, like if you trade in the latest generation device for something that just came out, you'll get significantly less cash. You get more cash than if you trade in a 2-year-old device or a
Yeah.
3-year-old device or a
Right.
4-year-old device, just because like there's not enough market in like first, basically when you trade in your phone, it's not being like sent to a recycling center. It's being like licensing out to like educational institutions, sent to like second world or third world countries, and
Or
being
sold on
sold.
secondary turnaround marketplaces.
Exactly. So one of the things that actually happened, that Apple caught someone doing, was that um, people were sending in like iPhone 4s and 5s to Apple, like just sending them free of charge for them to like recycle. But Apple contracts out these recycling part, like they don't do the recycling themselves. They like have like recycling partners. And what happened is that Apple was sending out like 1,000 phones to like their recycling thing, and they were turning around, and the recycling thing was reselling these phones like on like eBay and like all these
Oh
like
man.
secondary gray markets and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And Apple didn't even patch them. It was users that were like finding out these phones were like activation locked or something like that.
Ah,
So
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Apple ended up like suspending a relationship with them, but they never even like knew that this was a problem until like users were like bringing this to like their attention. So that's what you need to know about that.
We are done with the questions, and I drank 450, almost 600 milliliters of juices. So how about we say we wrap this up, like, with your quick bits, and then we'll do a quick plug as to what's going on, and then we'll wrap up for the week.
Okay, so Plastic Logic has just unveiled a small flexible color e-paper display using the advanced color e-paper that e-ink released like about 2 or 3 years ago. This is only 2.1 inches. It's basically like for clothing and for like the Internet of Things. So we have like a really good expose on this, like on our blog that you may want to check out with on. Amazon ebooks. So libraries want access to Amazon ebooks. So this includes ebooks that Amazon publishes themselves, as well as people who publish with Kindle Direct Publishing. There's various library advocacy groups that have asked Amazon to let like Amazon ebooks to be available in libraries, and it looks like this actually might happen. Um, Amazon has indicated in its discussions to allow ebooks to be licensed by libraries, but so far it's unavailable. An Amazon spokesperson told Goody Reader that the company is in active discussions with the Digital Public Library of America to make its ebooks available for library distribution. They are going to be testing a number of different models early next year. They told me, we believe libraries serve a critical purpose in communities across the country, and our priority is to make Amazon published ebooks available in a way that ensures a viable model for authors as well as library patrons. So Amazon is going to be testing out like having books that it publishes available in libraries. So this will be very interesting to follow. A lot of companies are announcing their top audiobooks or ebooks of 2020, from Amazon to Apple to Barnes and Noble, and all sorts of booksellers are doing it. So if you're looking for a next best read, check out your favorite online retailer. They're doing it. If you're in the market for an Amazon Kindle, they're actually doubled the amount of storage. So this is the entry level Kindle. Up until just a couple weeks ago, there was only the 4 gigabyte model available, but now that they've upgraded them free of charge for 8 gigabits, so you can get the new entry
Ah.
level Kindle with 8 gigs of memory. They're not offering like you could buy a 4 gig for this much and 8 gig for this much. It's just like 8 gigs is the new standard for like their prices and stuff like that. So that's somewhat like incredible, I think. So just double the storage. So that's it for quick bits for this week. But stay tuned next week for more quick
More
stories on
quick bits.
industry.
I actually have a little announcement, and actually, Mike, you don't even know about this because it's so early here. It's only 11 a.m. and we've been doing this live since about 9:55. We will start selling the Progress Technology manga reader in our store. We will list it on our site, and we will sell everything that we are allowed to sell outside of the outside of Japan. Japan has the ability to sell the unit themselves, so we can send the unit anywhere in the world, but due to certain licensing things, licensing issues, the volumes that you can buy will be limited. We have had a lot of people ask us about it, and from last show we had about 3 people on chat and about 14 or 15 people after the fact. They watched the VOD and they messaged us about it. We then called our partners at Progress Technologies in Tokyo, Japan, and they gave us instructions as to where to as to how to sell this and how to market it. So we will be actually adding them to our store over the weekend for you guys to purchase if you're so inclined to purchase those. And that is the manga reader that looks like a book, opens up, and you can read
It's the
manga in its
second gen
true
one with
raw
the
form.
SD cards, right?
Yes, you got it.
Okay.
So we will actually be selling those. Yeah. Sorry, Mike, we didn't even have time to discuss that, but surprise. Yeah. So we've been kind of working on these guys for a while, but we went on sell
Surprise,
them at the
mother
end of the store.
effer.
Yeah, they'll be available anywhere in the world. If you live in Brazil, if you live in Australia, if you live in Madagascar, we'll ship it to you. So that's it for this week's edition of the best show you're ever going to watch. And stay tuned for next week. We don't have our topic of discussion yet, but we will come up with something amazing. And remember, we are doing a contest every single week for the entire week of December on our YouTube channel. Right now, we're giving away a color e-reader, the iReader C6, first color e-reader to ever be released using the latest generation of color. And that's available right now on our YouTube channel.
Goody Reader needs your help. Chat, we need you to subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and click the notification bell so you'll automatically know when we upload like new live streams or new uploaded content. We're almost at 100,000 subscribers, and we really want to get there by the end of the year. So we really need your help to sort of like get there. It's like the final hurdle. I think we got like at least like this year, I think we got like 40,000 plus subscribers. Yeah, we really grew this year. And I think it's just because of like all the new devices coming out and just like everything. There's so many new things coming out in 2020, which was like really surreal to think that there was a global pandemic, but there was still so many cool new things that came out this year. So we could all use your support. You know, you could become a paid member and show your support to Goody Reader by clicking the join button below all of our live videos and all of our like normal videos. You know, it helps us with your support. Basically, we
get 10 times the entries in all the contests we do, and we're doing, as I said, 4 contests this month alone. So get in on it. Seriously, your odds.
We don't keep that money that you donate. We use it to like buy things to review that we don't get sent to review. Like we just discovered a new stylus like company that was like making Wacom EMR styluses that like I didn't even know about before.
We saw those guys at Connected Ink. We actually saw those guys. They make the Stadler pen, and they actually make Mitsubishi makes a stylus pen as well, and they weren't available up until now. And I guess that's another announcement. Yeah, we have listed the Stadler pens that are full EMR, which means they'll work across most, if not all, note-taking devices. We are getting our samples soon, and we'll confirm what devices they work on.
Yeah, so I mean, when you donate in chat for this live show or like you subscribe, I mean, that's where your dollars are being spent. It's like us like being able to like buy like review units that we wouldn't have otherwise had. And it's like, you know, reviewing a lot more like different stylized, something that I want to do just because like, you know, new devices aren't really released every week or every month, but sometimes new stylus and digital stationery is. And like, you know, why should you use the stylus that comes for free with your digital note-taking device, or should you buy a premium stylus? Like we do like top 5 or top 10 stylus wrap-ups of the year, but sometimes like new stuff just comes out that you may want to hear about. So just to give you a sense on like where your dollars and donations and subscribing like actually does for us, like,
and of course 2 hours
tangible
of
benefits
time each per week just to give back to you guys and talk to you on as much of a one-on-one basis as we can possibly do. We love to step away from the work for a little bit and you know, spend a couple hours of our time just sitting in this chair drinking a bunch of liquid water, needing to desperately go to the washroom. So
doing voguing too.
That's right. Should really not drink 2 gigantic things of juice while I'm sitting here, but whatever.
Yeah, I just drink coffee or like water, and I take like just sips. So
I did a whole espresso here, so
must be nice. So everyone, thank you for watching this week's edition of the Goody Reader live show on YouTube.
Jay just did a donation. I have to, sorry, I always interrupt you. Jay just donated a $5 donation, one of our longtime viewers and longtime users for as long as we can remember. I've seen that same display picture. He looks like Matt Damon. And yeah, thank you very much. I really appreciate that. That helps us, you know, give back to you guys. So thank you very much.
Thanks, dude. So we do this live show every week at 5 p.m. Pacific, 8 p.m. Eastern, and then whatever your local time zones are. I'm not gonna just like list off Mountain Time and GMT and all like the different time zones, but yeah, I mean, we do this on a weekend because like a lot of more people can like see it. You could watch like the VOD, video on demand, anytime that your heart desires. You can even rewatch it multiple times if you want to catch every single thing that we talk about, or you if you want to follow along. We're like maybe like you can mute me or not see me, but you can just focus on Peter the entire episode, and then like another watch, you can just like watch me on the screen and sort of like
There
just
you go.
cross out Peter, or just like put out like a piece of paper or something, just like the block the field of view.
Oh, your new iPhone, nice.
It's the closest thing I have. Everything else around me is like not paper. It's like flashlights and
Digital stuff.
not flashlights. Um,
Great.
SD cards. You know, it's like nothing to even like write. I don't even have a paper and pen anywhere near me, so I can't put a piece of paper and block myself. But yeah, yeah, there you go. I have some pencils and papers that I use to just sign things, but it's like, on that bookshelf over there in those like white containers, it's all just
Yeah,
like pencils and paper, well,
it's all
pencils and,
good.
and like pens. So yeah, that's us ranting and raving enough for this week. Thank you for watching the show.
Thank you very much.